Hi, I hope I'm audible. I assume, yeah. Thanks for the confirmation. Yeah, I will start. Let's just start with today's session. Just give me a second. Yeah. So, yeah, welcome to today's session. Uh, so just a thing. If you have any doubts or clarifications, do unmute yourself and then you can ask. Yes. Okay. So let's just start the session. So let's just go over the week 9 uh, assignment questions. Which of these is a pillar of sustainability? Social sustainability, industrial sustainability, agricultural sustainability, and transboundary sustainability. So social sustainability is one of the major pillars of sustainability. So which of these is commonly observed in primitive societies? Environmental determinism, possibilism, neo-determinism, stop and go determinism. It is environmental determinism. So which of this is a preventive check according to Malthus? So it's foresight. So if you have foresight about stuff, that acts as a preventive check to a lot of things. Which of this is a positive check according to Malthus? Uh, War on populations, especially because as the populations increases, the war breaks out, and then that kinds of reduces the populations. Which of these is commonly observed during humanizing of nature? Possibilism. And yeah, the logistic growth equation curve is which shaped? If you remember the logistic growth, there are two types of growth. One is logistic growth, one is exponential growth. Exponential growth is J-shaped curve. So till this point, so if you just look at, let me just, yeah, if you just look at this plot here, so it just goes on increasing exponentially. So that is exponential growth. However, in logistic growth, it kind of saturates at certain number, which is the number is called as carrying capacity. So it kind of roughly represents a S-shaped curve. So yeah, logistic growth looks like an S-shaped curve. Which of these is not a pillar of sustainability? It's transboundary sustainability is not a pillar of sustainability. The book An Essay on the Principle of Population was written by Malthus, because those earlier things that we're discussing are mostly about population, and it was Malthus who wrote this book. Yeah. According to Malthusian model, what happens? Population grows in which type of progression, and then food supply increases in which progression. So the population grows in geometric progression, while food supply increases in arithmetic progression. So here two, yeah, and the demographic transition sees a society move from. So the demographic transition, if you remember the demography, what is the demography of a population? Is the change in uh, the age structure, right? So how age structure of a population, or the individuals of the of the population. So where will you see a drastic transition? So when you move from high birth rate, high death rate situation to low birth rate and low death rate situation, there you get a demographic transition. So if you have a high birth rate and high death rate situation, your population age structure will look something else. While if you transition to a low birth rate and low death rate scenario, the demography looks entirely different. Yeah, so that's all with the questions. So yeah, going ahead, if you have any questions or clarifications, just unmute yourself, or you can ask them in the chat box itself. So I'm thinking of talking more, since last week we discussed slightly about IUCN, how things work with IUCN. Then we'll also thought of discussing, adding more about understanding. There is a group called CITES. So about that, and then looking at water resource and some other things that have been happening around us, right? So yeah, we'll just go over and try to understand what is CITES. So along with IUCN, lot of times when you hear a critically endangered species, you also hear the term CITES. It's if not CITES, some other thing related to it. So CITES is a convention that a lot of countries came together and agreed upon. It talks about, the convention is about trade. So international trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora. So across a lot of governments. So a lot of species, a lot of trade has been happening, and then happens a lot, and a lot of this trade involves a lot of endangered species. Because for instance, if you remember, we're discussing about pangolin the previous week. It kinds of a native to some region where it is hunted and stuff, and yeah, it ends up being transported to another region. And even the exotic pets trade, where you get this huge beautiful parrot species from South America or Africa, or even budgerigars, and some small finches, small birds. All of these, most of these are not bred. These are captured from one country and then are used as pet in another country, because the country allows them to be kept as pets. So it is a convention, so that you can try to regulate or try to reduce the trade, and then in term the effect that it has on wild fauna and flora, both plants and animals, right? It aims to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten survival species. We all know that trade is essential. A lot of times, we need a lot of species for a lot of other things, either to food, either as food, or there's some sort of education purposes, or a lot of other things. So it ensures that not none of the species that are involved in trade actually are threatened in the wild, if, when it comes to survival. So that's the aim of the CITES, and it was drafted in 1963 at a meeting of IUCN, the World Conservation Union. So it was formed roughly around that time. So what does it do? So how animals are classified? So CITES has three appendices: Appendix 1, Appendix 2, and Appendix 3. Just like IUCN, we have multiple categories. These are the categories that we have in CITES. So what species go into each category? So Appendix 1 is the highest level. Species threatened with extinction in the IUCN category by default end up in Appendix 1. And international commercial trade is generally prohibited to species that are present in Appendix 1. Like for instance, tigers, elephants, rhinos, or rhino, all these pangolins. So these are all critically uh, endangered and species that are close to threatened with extinction. So those three categories in IUCN. So and then trade is prohibited in these species. No trade can be done at any cost. And so 15% of animal species and 85% of plant species that have been put in this framework are in Appendix 1. So a lot of plants that are heavily traded are by law can't be traded, or not supposed to be traded, while Appendix 2 is intermediate. Species not necessarily threatened with extinction. These species are might be common, are not necessarily threatened with extinction, but if you don't regulate the trade, they can go extinct, or they are threatened. And species whose specimens in trade looks like the species listed for conservation reasons. For instance, there might be species that are closely related. One might be critically endangered, and then the other might not be. But they resemble so much that, if you allow trade in one species, that can have a, because a lot of people might not be aware that, they're two different species, but they look very similar. They can actually smuggle this in by in the name of this, right? So yeah, for instance, leopard skin versus tiger skin. So some people are just, just want some sort of animal skin that doesn't look very similar, but yeah. And international commercial trade is allowed, but not but controlled. So all the species that are involved in that are in appendix 2, you can trade, but it is in a controlled manner. So you have to do a lot of so and so stuff. And 65% of animal species and 35% plant species are in appendix 2. And appendix 3, subject to regulation within the jurisdiction of a party, for which cooperation of other parties is needed to control international trade. So it is respect to, here the party means the country which is involved. So for instance, some species might be threatened in some country, and then so they wanted to, prohibit the trade of that, but it may not be. For instance, you talk about lions. A lot of African countries allow uh, hunting of lions, right? They have these games, they have these huge things that are planned where you can go and hunt lions and then carry the trophy back. And so that species can be pushed in appendix 2 there. But you can't really hunt lions in India. You will be jailed, and then there will be a lot of legal action taken against you, because they are different species. But Indian government, due to a lot of other things, be it the population of the species in India, or in this or a lot of other things, the country kinds of, puts a hold on that. So those species are generally put in appendix 3. Here we are talking about different species, but if it's the same species, then it goes into appendix 3. And of the 10 million plus CITES trade transactions, and then you have to report your transactions through CITES, 78% involve fauna and 22% involve flora. So most of this trade actually happens, most of it is animals, and very few of it is plants. So yeah, so that's the CITES. So there are three things. So what how does CITES brings in these things? So it kind of puts a framework, so that, there is a uh, the species, whatever the species that are traded, it makes sure that, they are traded in a, regulated manner, not like, any random manner, so that, it doesn't affect the species. Parties must make a legal acquisition finding to confirm this, and then they have to be sustainable. So parties must take a non-detriment finding, a science-based biological finding which confirms that trade in the species is sustainable, will not be detrimental to the survival of the species. So yeah, before it can be involved in trade, you have to make sure that, taking out the species or transporting the species doesn't affect the native ecosystem. And traceability, because CITES issues permits and certificates, they can be traced, of whichever things, where all the things have traveled from one to one, and then where how things have been going around. So this adds to the usability part of, or, trade part of the uh, species, along with IUCN. So yeah, I feel it's important that, we should discuss this thing. And yeah, these are just some stats. If you look at roughly 334 species are in appendix 1, including 21 populations of the same species in different areas. Appendix 2, 523 mammals, but a lot of these uh, species that are in appendix 1 are mammals and birds, right? And a lot of birds are in appendix too, because a lot of those parrots, especially the parrots, with that you get to see in a lot of these pet shops, they are traded crazily. And even a lot of reptiles, people, you know get reptiles, especially frogs and snakes, from one region to another region, just to have pets, especially kids, and then who are pampered by parents, they just get them. And then there is a lot of trade that involves invertebrates also, especially spiders, and then the bigger spiders like tarantulas, because they are so colorful sometimes, and then they are so huge and mesmerizing to watch. A lot of people are involved in these trades. And then if you just go online and then want to look out for, just if you google this species or spiders or tarantulas for sale, or ant colonies for sale, or bees for sale, they're there everywhere. And then fish, we get a lot of people keep fishes as pets. So yeah, a lot of species are involved in this trade. So be careful when you want to have a pet, an exotic pet. Make sure that that you are not trying to get a species that is critically threatened, or that have been imported from outside. If it's bred, that might be okay, but it doesn't make things easier, so that you are having an exotic species as pet. It's better to have some sort of other species. So yeah, it kinds of acts in regulating all of these things. If you are interested more, you can go to cites.org for more information. Yeah, that's all about cites I had to say. And yeah, we'll discuss little more about water as a natural resource, right? It's one of the resource, that has, it is a wonder resource, you can think it of. It has the both the ability to help ease our life, and then make our life worse. And then with climate change and all, the effects of the water are going to determine kind of how we are going to, where we are going to live, and not only how. If you look at where on earth is the water, so to overall all the water that we have, only 2.5% of the water is fresh water, and 97.5% is roughly is in oceans and other saline water forms. And then out of this fresh water, most of it is preserved in glaciers and ice caps, especially in the Arctic and Antarctic, and in the third pole, the Himalayas. And then 30% in groundwater, and 1% roughly around 1% as surface waters like rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, all these things. And of the surface water, we have a lot of it in the form of ground ice and permafrost, and 20% in lakes. Soil moisture, a lot of soil actually holds moisture, so if you want to do that, it takes a bunch of soil, and then if you kind of keep it in a wrapped plastic cover, you can actually see that soil, when soil respires, it pumps a lot of moisture. And then there are swamps and marshes, rivers, atmosphere, even the living organisms themselves have a lot of water. So if you remember, the permafrost uh, is nothing but frozen soil, so which holds a lot of ice, and then it has in turns acts as a carbon storage. It has been acting as a carbon storage. If it melts, it releases not only the carbon, but also the water that it has been there. So yeah, very small amount of fresh water, and water that is can be actually consumed by humans, that is available to us, and not all form is available. There have been multiple methods, if you are familiar, to convert this saline water to fresh water, because a lot of areas we don't have fresh access to fresh water. If you And the way civilizations have been growing is along rivers, so because that's where you get fresh water. And then because we are heavily dependent on water for agriculture, for drinking, and for daily needs, bathing, washing, or any other thing. Recreation purposes also. We have a lot of these water parks. You need a lot of water for that. So, so a lot of these civilizations have established themselves close to water bodies, and then we have very limited of them. But uh, but the thing is, the according to demand there is so yeah, so when water is not available to everyone in the same amounts as much as is the demand, so it's called as water gap. So when demand exceeds the supply, renewable supply from rivers, lakes, and shallow aquifers, so that's what we call as water gap. So there are multiple reasons the why this water gap actually arises. So it arises due to increase in domestic usage. So instead of using just a bucket or couple of buckets for bathing, if you're using shower, you might end up wasting 4 buckets for just taking a shower. So, and along with that, for various other purposes, there might be increase in domestic usage of water. And then there is an industrial demand. So a lot of our things, a lot of human development has been associated with this simultaneous industrial development, right? And then a lot of these industries actually need a lot of water for a lot of things, either it for reducing the temperatures inside, or if you have watched about, for instance, how potato chips are made. So when the potatoes are actually sourced, they had to be washed. So if the potato is washed inside home, you can wash a bunch of potatoes with just a mug of water. But if it has to be done in industrial scale, there has to be hundreds of liters of water that has to be poured on these uh, potatoes, so that without any human involvement, that the force of the water can itself take most of the dust. So be it for food related purposes or any other chemical manufacturing, there is an increase in industrial demand. And then ever expanding agriculture to meet the growing population, because agriculture needs a lot of water, especially crops such as paddy, right? We need a lot of it needs water that at least 1 to 2 feet of water has to be stagnated for at least a couple of months for paddy to grow. So that takes a lot of water. And yeah, that's why there is an increasing amount of water gap that is forming, not only India, across the globe. And then if you look at this map, yeah, so it is an interactive map, but I took a screenshot so that we can check it here. So it talks about the irrigation water gap. So India has to pump more groundwater than any other country, because we are one of those countries where economy is most of the economy is still based on agriculture, and most of the groundwater that we pump is actually used for irrigation. In the arid northwestern states of Punjab and Haryana, if you can see from these tall structures here, uh, thirsty rice and wheat are now the dominant crops. You know, it's these are the places where we get a lot of our rice and wheat, and wells that the main sources of water irrigation. So you have canals that supply from rivers, but still a lot of these places you have bore wells that actually supply water to these fields. The water table is sinking up to 3 meters a year in these regions. And then so the taller the structure and the lighter the color is, the more the gap. So there is a lot of demand, but there is very little supply. So is the case for a lot of other arid regions in the country. Some regions it's because of agriculture. Some regions it's just because of the region itself. Some arid regions don't just have enough water, right? So yeah, it's just increasing. And then agriculture is one of those major things. And then there has been recent study last year that was published, so that says that we have been pumping out a lot of groundwater, and then this is doing no good to the earth. And then groundwater depletion as a significant contributor to global sea rise level. So so if you remember the water cycle, where does the water go that has come up? So most of it in from the fields has to evaporate, right? Once it evaporates, it has to precipitate and come off. Very little what the rate at which we are taking the water from the ground, and then the rate at which the water actually gets refilled in these uh, aquifers in the underground is much different. So we are taking it at far more greater pace than it can actually refill itself. So most of the water is coming out and then it's starting to fill outside. So it may it in terms of precipitation on the land or in the ocean. So that's leading to global sea level rise. And then this has, so if you look at this plot, so this is what it looks as: total groundwater storage change on land. If you look at the northwestern region of India, Punjab, Haryana, you get much darker blue color, and then even in China, and then US, and then other countries very slight. So where you have a lot of change in groundwater on the land. And then this is another map which says that an associated change in sea level. So yeah, the sea level has kind of increased, and then the groundwater has actually dropped around these areas. So yeah, it doesn't stop there. So what does the paper kind of find out? So roughly saying that melting of polar ice sheets and mountain glaciers have been understood as a main cause of sea level rise. We all know that sea level rise is increasing because a lot of these glaciers are melting, and then whatever the water is stored on the land because of in the form of these glaciers and ice sheets is coming down into the water, so it's increasing. But it has been proposed that sea level rise due to groundwater depletion resulting from irrigation. So because of irrigation, we are pulling a lot of this groundwater, and also acting as an anthropogenic contribution to sea level rise. So a climate model estimated that 1993 to 2010, during this 17-18 years, total groundwater depletion was 2150 gigatons, equivalent to global sea rise level of 6.24 mm. So roughly, we pulled up so much water from the ground that has been there and put it up outside, that led to the rise of sea level by 6.24 mm. It may not be, you may not think this is nothing, just 6.24 mm. But in the long run, or in some places where every millimeter matters, people can lose their homes or their livelihoods. So that's why rising sea levels are an important uh, thing to consider with climate change. And then along with that, uh, the paper found out, the results say that the model estimate of water distribution, since we have been pulling a lot of this water from the ground and putting up into the ocean, so we are redistributing the way water is present on the earth. So this resulted in a drift of earth's rotational pole about 78.48 centimeters towards east. So if you remember, earth has a pole, right? Rotational pole, so the axis along with it actually rotates around itself. So because of this shift, because of the water being pulled up and then put up into the ocean, it's kind of tilting it has tilted the earth in its rotational plane by 78 centimeters. So yeah, that's huge. In combination with other well understood sources of water redistribution, such as melting of polar ice sheets and mountain glaciers. Uh, so they are saying is, we know that these glaciers melting and then polar ice sheets have been sources of rising sea levels, but this study says that groundwater depletion uh, also acts as a rising uh, source of rising sea levels, and then result not only resulted in rising sea level but also in shift of earth's rotational pole. So this is how it looks like. If you look at the directional observed direction of polar motion shown in the blue line compared with the some pink line of the influence. So yeah, so if you just account for, so how did they calculated that thing? So what they did was like they built up a model using the just the melting of glaciers and then polar ice sheets, and then they, according to the model, it shows that the Earth still should be so and so degrees or so and so centimeters, but it's not what we were observed what they had observed in real time. So when they accounted for the amount of groundwater that has been put up into the oceans, so the predictions actually coincide with what is being observed in now. So that's how they could say that that because of the groundwater it has resulted in this much tilt after accounting for ice sheets and glacier melt. So yeah, it's a real sad thing to see how we are changing not only the things on earth, the earth itself, the way it is. Yeah. uh, so this is, if you look at India, where all it's called aquifer map, where all different source of aquifers or the source of water is present in the underground. So this shows that thing. We have a lot of aquifers, and then some regions are poor, some regions are good. Excuse me. So there are a lot of ecosystems that are actually dependent on these groundwater resources. We have been modifying groundwater like anything. So there are wetlands, there are lakes. So most of these wetlands and lakes are dependent on this groundwater. So there are a lot of uh, values associated with these also. There are water quality benefits like uh, microfauna in this groundwater can help clean up contaminants, and then a lot of these industrial effluents can be taken up by plants. So a lot of these industries actually have a lot of associated wetlands around it, so that water that the industry uses for various purposes when passed through this wetland can actually remove a lot of those heavy metals or contaminants from the ground, from the water, and then that water can be again used for a lot of other purposes. It has its own biodiversity value, these ecosystems, the wetlands and lakes, as many species are dependent on habitats maintained by groundwater discharge. And they have archaeological and social value because some sites such as springs may have cultural significance. And if you talk about biodiversity, well, there are a lot of multiple species that are unique to these ecosystems that you get to see. For instance, uh, you know, Ladakh is a trans-Himalayan region where it's a desert, it's a cold desert. So it has a lot of wetlands, and most of these wetlands are sustained through glacial meltwater and groundwater. And then these wetlands offer a fantastic place for a majestic bird, black-necked crane. It's a species that you get to see only in the Trans-Himalayan region, majorly in Trans-Himalayan region, although it comes little down for wintering. And then they're exclusive wetland dwelling birds. So, and then there's such a majestic birds to witness out there. But if these wetlands actually disappear, you're not only losing a lot of these values associated with these wetlands, but you're also losing the species associated with them. So it has happened. So one famous example is the Aral Sea, where because of human greed and need, this Aral Sea has disappeared. So what is so little background to what is Aral Sea? Aral Sea was an endorheic lake, or a lake that doesn't have any outlets, just like uh, Dead Sea. So it's lying between Kazakhstan to its north and Uzbekistan to its south. So it has multiple countries surrounding it. It's kind of landlocked. So such a big lake, but most of these big lakes we often refer to as seas. And then it's one of the fourth largest lake in 1960. The Aral Sea has already shrunk to tenth of its original size. So when it was the largest around 1960s. Now it is one tenth of the size of what it was. And then Aral Sea began shrinking in 1960s. So after the rivers that fed it were diverted for irrigation projects. So it has a lot of rivers that comes and empties into the sea. But the thing that used to happen is, because to for irrigation purposes for agriculture, especially cotton, the Soviet government, all these some of these countries were in Soviet before its collapse, Soviet Union. So during that time, they diverted through canals the sea, so the water that used to feed this sea, right? And then with no water to feed it anymore, it has gone. So if you look at roughly here, all this white boundary is what was the shoreline in 1960s. Okay, and then this is now the remaining sea, and then it is kind of divided into two parts. It's no longer connected with itself. In some regions, it has, receded more than 50 kilometers from 1960. So it has gone. So what has happened because of that thing? So a lot of people, locals, experiences a lot of health issues, ranging from stunted growth, reduced fertility, lung and heart problems to increased rates of cancer. So there are a lot of multiple diseases that has come up because the water is they are drinking is contaminated drinking water caused by, and because it has much more increased because the water has receded and a lot of the pollutants are now getting concentrated because there is no water coming up and it started drying up. As the sea dried up, toxic chemicals from the cotton industry, because a lot of times you need a lot of fertilizers for growing and also for processing, you need a lot of chemicals, and these chemicals we just throw them in water, and then as the sea or this lake started drying up, these chemicals are exposed, and then the winds and the sandstorms that are created just disperse them everywhere, and then people inhale them, and then they had a lot of, they had to deal with the consequences of what has happened to it. So yeah, so there have been a lot of initiatives that have been uh, taken to prevent further, loss of the Aral Sea. So they have built up a dam so that they can prevent further drying, and then at least prevent some of save some of the area. And then there's a nice documentary uh, on YouTube by BBC. If you guys are interested, yeah, you can check it out. You just have to. It's by BBC. It just shows how it has the RLC has actually changed across years. So this is what it used to be during 1970s and 2014. You have one part, isolated part in the north, and then one isolated in the south. And the previous image that I has shown was in 2000s. So this was in 2000. It has gone into 2014. This is also gone. What we have left is this patch, and this patch. So this is what satellite imagery has revealed. So yeah, things are changing, and then water. So yeah, uh, so we'll just skip this video as of now, which I think you guys please go onto BBC's channel and then you can watch it there. But before I go ahead, uh, I hope you guys are aware. I think most of you guys have watched uh,
विवेक आप गए नहीं
this thing, Three Idiots, right? Uh, most of this movie revolves around this person, and then it's kind of based around an inventor from that region, Ladakh. Uh, if you know the name Sonam Wangchuk. So there has been recently, these people have been advocating for thing. If it's out in the news, so they have been marching from Ladakh, Ladakh's capital Leh, to Delhi from September 1. It has been almost a month. So they are about to reach uh, Delhi today or tomorrow, I'm not sure, but they are marching for their rights, not only for their rights but also to save the landscape, to bring up laws that can, prevent damage to this environment, especially the water resource and subsequent damages because of climate change, right? Because trans-Himalayan region, not only trans-Himalayan, Himalayan region is such a region where, a slight change in climate can wreak havoc, which we have been witnessing for the past couple of years or past decades, where you have some years you have a lot of devastating floods, cloud bursts, and then yeah, every year this in Himachal especially and Uttarakhand, every monsoon it creates havoc, a lot of lives lost, a lot of property loss, a lot of damage. So they are kind of marching on, to prevent, uh, to bring up laws so that, we can try together to prevent. Not only him, a lot of people from Ladakh and a lot of people from Himalayan region are actually joining them in the march. So they are doing it on foot. It's not easy to walk in this region, trust me, and they are doing it on foot to bring awareness to this issue and to help conserve the environment so that, we don't have to uh, face issues in the future. So yeah, please go further and then try to understand what all multiple things that they are marching for, along with the rights, forest rights, or the rights that they are requesting according to Schedule 6, and the environment aspect, which is really interesting because it's really important in especially with coming in respect to climate change, because the one of the main reason is like, even even if they are remote region, if the people from the remote region, they are going to get affected. It's not like I'm from this region, I will not face any effects. That's not going to happen like that, because every region is going to get affected. Either you will have heavy rainfall or you will have severe droughts, especially in trans Himalayas, where much of the, especially the water requirements are filled through glacier meltwater. And then even it for, be it for agriculture, be it for drinking, be it for any other thing, water is sourced from agriculture, sorry, glacier meltwater. So with climate change, very less little snowfall happening and glaciers melting very fast, so in the couple of years, if you don't take any steps, there will be no more water left people to survive in this region. And simultaneously this will affect the people in the plains also, because most of these rivers actually originate in these regions in the Himalayas, are actually most of these rivers are glacial fed rivers. So if water goes down, people not only here are affected, but people that are below depending on those rivers are also themselves are affected. So their march was to symbolize that, that climate change uh, is just not going to affect remote, not only going to affect some random places, it's going to affect the remotest of the place, and it's going to have devastating consequences unless we are going to act upon it. So try to understand more about the voice of this man, and then of these people who are trying to march for the well-being of the future generations. And then there are other things that also happen. Minerals are one such thing that we, as people, lot of, you know development happening and all we need. So let's just look at the country of Africa. We know it's one of those abundant regions in the world that has a lot of minerals associated with it. So yeah, there are a lot of copper deposits, there are a lot of cobalt deposits, there are a lot of diamonds, gold, a lot of deposits are there in the African subcontinent. And if you look at our smartphone, every person has a smartphone these days. Sometimes some people have multiple smartphones. If you know the body, so there are a lot of metals that are actually used in preparation of this smartphone. Especially if you are familiar with the news, the hype around Apple is the body is made up of titanium. Some uh, phones have aluminum body, and older phones tend to use have plastic bodies. The circuit is to made of silicon, copper, and all. Battery, lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, all these elements, majorly lithium. So most of the batteries are Li ion or lithium ion based batteries, so they are rechargeable. And speakers and microphones need some sort of minerals. And then the glass actually has silica and potassium. So there are a lot of minerals that are used in a lot of these things. And then lithium and cobalt are some of the key materials to produce batteries. And then with electronic vehicles being pushed into the mainstream focus, these regions are being exploited, and then they are becoming biggest exporters. Like in 2019, about 63% of the world's cobalt production came from Democratic Republic of Congo. So this region, most, it has a lot of other resources also. It's not like they're not these resources are not available in other countries. It's available in other countries, but they're well exploited in this region. And there are so with this boom in electric vehicles coming up, a lot of these metals has to come up at higher pace, right? And it has its own effects. So so there is a lot of conflict that happens actually around this thing. So there are a lot of news articles that if you are willing to go and search, you can find about uh, Congo and then some of the African regions where the thing to exploit these minerals by some of the corporations and some countries, some other countries, actually resulted in a lot of conflict in this region. And then loss of lot of lives. And even a lot of these minerals that are sourced these days from this region, especially if you look at Democratic Republic of Congo, are by people, are small scale artisans, or people that have inadequate training or inadequate elements just to sustain themselves, just for sake of food. They go out do that, and then they're exploited just like anything for. And then there is a conflict that arises around these mines also. So and then all of these things actually end up uh, these all of these elements end up in our mobile phones, especially to satisfy the growing population demands. So a lot of these companies started advocating for uh, properly sourced lithium or cobalt in their manufacturing of smartphones. So there are some companies that say that we have sourced legally, or the source from those regions that the people have been compensated with respect to work. It's not from the regions that is conflict ridden, and then we're not taking advantage of the people. But some corporations are just aiming for profit and not for the well-being of people from regions like this. So yeah, so it causes a lot of extent of damage, not only to natural resources but to the wildlife itself, and to humans and societies itself. And then yeah, so the mining is also uh, not easy on wildlife, right? It affects wildlife like anything. So especially in, if you remember, iron ore mines in India, we have iron ore mines and we have coal mines in India, where most of these mines are open cast mines. Means you openly dig up huge swaths of area, making up a huge kind of you cave in the earth, you dig up the earth, making a huge bowl like area. Basically you dig up the whole area and it's just a huge cavity left in there. And then most of these mining areas in India actually uh, overlaps with protected areas. And then the government is doing everything to get the protection out of these areas so that they can clear uh, the requirements for mining, give permits for mining in the terms of development, which is something that is really sad to see. But this not only affects species. So the one of the, if you look at the effects it has, the first effect it has is on the water, the quality of life of the people or the animals that dwell on the water resource from these regions, because a lot of these are forested regions. Lot of rivers or streams originate from these regions. So when it rains, it carries away a lot of these minerals with it, so it contaminates the water and then making the water unfit for consumption by any animals or plants. So that's the first thing it affects. It affects the air quality in some regions where you have open cast mines. The dust, it just changes the whole area. And for wildlife, there is a loss of habitat that is happening where you're taking off huge swaths of land, and then you're also essentially blocking off corridors. Like animals can't actually move from one region to another when you have such a huge pit that that spans multiple kilometers, hundreds of meters or kilometers in length, and so much deep. And then there is a lot of activity. It's not like these are isolated regions. A lot of these, they had to be transported, right? There will be a railway line, there will be a road that is laid up to transport the ore from this place to the industry where it can be processed. So it affects with corridors, and also humans, especially the people who live in those regions. So a lot of this mining comes with the technical aspects, right? Not everyone can get a job, and then these people are, first thing is, these people are getting evicted from those native regions from where they have been living for hundreds of years, hundreds and thousands of years, because some other person want to profit, and then for the greater goodness, in the namesake of greater goodness, a lot of people getting affected. They're not equally compensated in most of these cases, like in terms of money, or uh, given different other region to place to live, so that there's sometimes the government tends to give packages, like we'll give you so much money, so much, so and so area of land, so that you can relocate to another area and you can live your life there, but forget about this area. But those packages are not, you know most of the times it's not worth what they use they were having here or holding here. Or even in terms of jobs, they can't actually go and work in the mines. Even there, if they end up working, they are, most of the times they are exploited. So there are a lot of other things that also comes up with this mining. This might be just a case for not only for India but a lot of other regions also. Some regions have, some countries have higher amount of regulation of how things work when it comes to mining and then its effects. But yeah, and even in Australia also is a country that has developed more because of most of this mining industry and all. But a lot of these places, when they do studies about how wildlife tends to come back after, when the mine has been closed, shut down and all, it's not easy, it's not a slow, it is not a easy fast process. It takes multiple years, multiple decades for some even the tinier taxa to recover. Forget about huge, you know bigger taxa. So mining has its own effect, but for us as a society to keep on growing, we keep on advocating for, you know getting a lot of resources out of the earth, so that we can have a lavish and comfortable lifestyle, with, when a lot of people are getting actually exploited for what they are present there for. So yeah, and not only Democratic Republic of Congo, a lot of these regions in the African country are being exploited for a lot of these minerals resources, and then there is a lot of conflict that happens associated with this because of these minerals. And then a lot of these countries and other major corporation tends to take advantage of this. So yeah, if you are really concerned about the some of the electronic equipment that you buy, make sure that the company advocates for the good ones, not for the not for the minerals that are actually sourced in a way that that actually damages the environment and the people there. So yeah, don't forget to read about more about this march from Ladakh to New Delhi. So if you're interesting to participate and meet these people, I think I think they might hang around in Delhi for a couple of days after Gandhi Jayanti also. So if you are in from Delhi, you can go and meet them and then get inspired and learn more also. So yeah, so that's all I had today. So if you have any questions or doubts, I would be happy to take them. Okay, so yeah, I hope this was informative, and then you get to learn some interesting things, and then current things that are going around here. Okay, then yeah, since yeah you're the only person here, since you don't have any doubts, I think we can call it a day. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for joining for today's session. Hope you get to learn something interesting and new. Yeah, that's the end of the session. Thank you. Bye. If you don't have any doubts, you can stop here.